Hello and welcome to Model Train Fun. Today we are going to talk about signals. Signals will help us make the layout we're making more lively, but more importantly it also shows an importance of the real world, the prototypical world, where signals are actually really essential because they provide the safety for the trains to avoid collisions and so on. This is going to be the first video in I'm guessing 6-part series, but I'm a little unsure. It depends on how many topics we need to cover. And in this one here, we are going to look at what type of signals do Märklin actually provide. Enjoy the video. In this episode, I'm going to give an overview of the signals available from Märklin. Before I start, let's remind ourselves what is the purpose actually of a signal. Well, the purpose of the signal is to provide safety and restrict the train movement so we avoid collisions. So as an example, we don't want a train to move into the platform unless that platform is actually free and there's no other train there. Or if we're out on the main line, we don't want to move ahead on the main line if there's a train ahead of us, or in case of a single main line where we have to share the tracks in both directions, we want to avoid a head-on collision as well. Märklin models two different kinds of signals. What we see here to the left is the semaphore signals. What we see to the right are the light signals. The semaphore signals are typically older and were the first to exist. And if you look at them here, they actually have a little wing on it that can move depending on what they intend to show. The light signals, on the other hand, will show permitted train movement by lights instead. Typically, you will be able to see the semaphore signals all the way back from the beginning of when trains appeared, so from the era 1 all the way up to the modern. And the light signals, they came about in, I believe, the end 60s, so that would be era 4 to the modern, perhaps at the end of era 3. If we look at the semaphore signals, or let's say the typical things a signal would signify, would be stop. So basically, I want the train to stop. Perhaps because there's a train ahead or so on, the line in front of us are not free. And then there's proceed, which typically you could think of as green or go, which basically mean now the train is allowed to move ahead within the speed limits there are of the line, of course. And then there is the third main signaling aspect, which is slow, which is basically proceed slowly, which would typically indicate that there's a reason you have to go slow to move forward, which could be, for example, that a turnout is set for turning off the main line and there's a restricted speed through the turnout. Related to the eras, the interesting thing is today you will see a mix of signals. So as an example, perhaps on branch lines or let's say museum lines, you will see the semaphore signals, but you may also see the light signals on the same line. So this depends a little on how they have been modernized. And don't forget, if you go all the way up to the modern era, then signals are more and more a thing of the past, because signals are becoming, let's say, wireless and actually becoming something the engineer can see in the dashboard of the train instead. If we start by looking at the light signals, I created an overview here, and it's actually trying to show all the light signals that are available from Märklin, or at least it's in the Märklin database today. If we look here in the center, from the center here where it says home block, it says home entry and home exit. These three types of signals are the main types of signals that exist. They are there to actually protect the line ahead of you and make sure that the train doesn't move ahead unless it is allowed to. Then we have over here the column just to the left, the distance signal. That is there so you can be warned that the next signal may, for example, show stop. So a typical example would be, let's say there's an entry into the train station. If you are not allowed to go into the train station, then there would be a home signal that would be red, and then in front of that there would be a signal that would be yellow, that is a distance signal that would be yellow, and actually warn the train driver that he should prepare to stop. And in many cases, or let's say in cases where the blocks or the distance between signals are not that long, then you would be able to see a combination which you see over here to the furthest to the right, where there's a combination of a block signal and an entry signal. And a distance signal. So basically that would mean that the signal might show green, but it will also indicate underneath with a distance signal that yes, it's green now, but be aware the next signal might be or is red, so that's why it could indicate prepare to stop. In order to avoid confusion, it's not depicted here. If the main signal is red, then the distance signal on the same mast will show nothing, no light at all. And then we have signals here furthest to the left. That is the yard signals. They are different because in essence it's a more question of allowing a little more free movement, where the home signals heavily restrict movement of the trains. The yard signals are more there to say within this area you are allowed to do shunting, for example, or switching. So it's typically, they look different, so they cannot be confused, and there's a stop, and then the proceed is basically more like a proceed with shifting. If we look at the series available of the signal types, we have the newest or the latest and most modern here in the top of the table. That series is what I would call a smart signal, and it supports all the protocols you can think of. So the standard Märklin addressing, DCC addressing, but also MFX as well. And as you see, this is also the richest one where there's the most types of signals as well. Let's just talk a little about the difference between a smart signal and a dumb signal. You see just below there's what I would call what Märklin calls the startup series. That's what I would call dumb signals. Dumb signals have no decoders, no smarts, no functionality. In essence, they're just a light, nothing more. Smart signals have a light, they have a decoder, they can actually restrict train movement by powering off the track and having a stop section. And what you also will see, this is for the semaphore ones though, they will have a smooth movement, which other types of signals may not have. If we look at the latest smart version here, you can see there's different types of the yard lights. One is actually one that's at the ground, the other one is at a mast. For the distant signals, there is actually a version that's kind of the standard version, but then there's also another one that indicates, hey, there's a short braking distance until the home signal. The home signals basically come in 3 editions. The home block edition is basically just protecting the block in the next or upcoming block, I should say. So it basically only shows stop and proceed. If you are talking about in front of a train station, or let's say in front of an area where there may be slow speed restrictions under certain conditions, you would have the home entry signal, which can show stop, proceed, and slow. Now, if we look at the home block and home entry, they can both be preceded by the distant signal. So if it's the home block, then the distant signal really can only get the types prepare to stop or prepare to proceed, because the home block does not have a slow. However, the home entry can show stop, proceed, and slow. So in that case, the distant signal will also be able to signal prepare to slow. Then we have the signal over here, which is the home exit signal. So the home exit signal is typically one you would see when you are exiting train stations or maybe exiting the yard. So what's interesting about this one is that it shows the movements of the home entry, so the stop, proceed, and proceed slowly or slow, but it also can at the same time show that switching is allowed, but you are not allowed to move past this signal, for example. So you would typically find this signal on the border between either main line or yard, or train station and yard, and typically when you are exiting. The last one, as I spoke about before, is basically just where the distant signal has been mounted on the same one. So we see there's a home block, there's a home entry signal, there's a home exit signal. Each of those you can find with a distant signal on it as well. So you will have one that is a home block signal, a home entry signal, and a home, actually that says yard entry, it should say yard or exit signal as well. So this is the newest generation of the light signals from Märklin. There's also one, and that's not a lot older, so I called it modern here. As you can see here, all the numbers are red. That's actually to signify that they are not produced by Märklin anymore. So typically you can still find them at model dealers and so on. However, it's not really produced by Märklin. The only differences I know of, because I only have the latest edition and just read about it, is that the modern one does not support the MFX. Other than that, as I understand it, they look the same and act the same. Going back to the startup decoder, so the middle row here, or the startup signals, sorry. The startup signals basically only have very few variants, because in essence the idea with these is to have them more for the startup series, for entry, for people easily to get going. So there is really only a yard signal, a distance signal, and a home block signal. Now let's look at the semaphore signals. So in essence, a lot is the same. There are more light signals than there are semaphore signals, which also, as I understand it, reflected the times. So if we look to the right, we have two home signal columns to the right here. The main one is the home block. It's exactly like the light signal. However, there's also a wing on there that can show the signal aspect. So in this case, where it's stop, or the signal indicates stop, you will see the wing is horizontal. There is also a little light on there. So you see there's a red light in here. So the semaphore signal will actually both have a light and a wing. If the wing is at a 45-degree angle and the light is green, it's indicating proceed. So in this way, the home block can be used exactly like I explained with the home block for the light before. Now it's just a semaphore signal instead. The home entry get to look a little more complex. It has three signaling aspects like the home entry of the light signal. Basically, it can show stop, it can show proceed, and slow or proceed slowly. However, it uses two wings to do this. So the stop, in order to make it look like the standard home block, it actually has one wing, or the top wing, horizontally, and the other lower wing has it vertically. And you still see the little light up here that's indicating red. The proceed basically also looks like the home block semaphore signals. So basically the top wing is 45 degrees angle, it shows green, and then the lower wing is actually going straight up or is vertical. The slow is indicated by the two wings actually going to the side at a 45 degree angle, and then you have green and yellow for slow. So that's the semaphore signals where it's the home signal. Now the semaphore signals for distant signals come in two editions here. The light signal, remember, only came in one because it was really just a question of which light is turned on. For the semaphore signals, there's two variants. There's this one here, furthest to the left of them, that's the distant block. That one can only show two signals aspects, which is prepare stop and prepare to proceed. So that one will match with the home block signal. The prepare to stop is basically if you see a yellow disc in front of you, it actually means that the next home signal will indicate stop, right? So that's why you have to prepare to stop. So in this case, you see the stop is indicated by a visible disc, yellow disc at the top, and lights showing yellow as well. If it shows prepare to proceed by actually moving the disc so the disc becomes horizontal. When it's horizontal, the train driver actually can't see it. So to him, there is no yellow disc, and the lights also turn green. So that's how it's indicated that he can proceed, and the following signal is prepare to proceed. You also have the distant light, semaphore light, in another variant that's more the distant entry one that would match with the home entry light. The big difference between the distant block signal and the distant entry signal is it has the possibility to show slow. So it has again prepare to stop with the visible discs with lights on as well. It has prepare to proceed with a disc that's horizontal, so you don't see the disc but lights green. And then it has prepare slow that actually has a yellow-green light combination. It has a arrow on there that has turns to the side, and you see the yellow disc, so that would actually be the prepare slow. So there's no signal where the distant and the home signals are combined on one mast for the semaphore signals. The yard signal for the semaphore signals is one where it's actually more or less a black box, and in there's a vertical line. There's a line. If it's horizontal, it means stop, and if it's at a 45 degree angle, it means proceed, or it should say you can proceed with the switching. If we look at the series Märklin has on these signals, the latest edition, which is a smart edition, it actually has all of the variants here. If you note under the home and entry, there's a N and a L behind it. That's because the mast can come in two different versions depending on the number. The 70393 is a narrow mast, where the 70394 is what is called a lattice mast, or it looks like a girder, or you can see through it, right? So the N is a narrow solid mast, and the L is a lattice, let's say grid girder mast, where you can halfway see through. And the only difference there is basically the looks. If we notice in the startup series, there's actually no semaphore signals at all. For the more modern ones, so again, the big difference between the latest series and the modern series of the semaphore signals is basically the protocol supported, so the latest support MFX. As I understand it, there are no other differences. However, do double check before you buy some of these. The latest or the modern version and the latest version are both still produced by Märklin, and you can find them around. And as I also understand it, they both have the smooth movement, right? So here is the interesting part of the smooth movement. If you look at the home block signal, for example over here, when it moves or changes between stop and proceed, these signals will actually slowly move the wing of the signal. Some of the even older generation of signals will basically abruptly move them, more like what you know from the turnouts with a turnout decoder that just will say click, right? All the semaphore signals support a stop section as well. Let me just briefly talk about even older signals. So none of these are available, and I've just grouped them together here. So they do support a stop section as well. They do have light, they have no decoder, and there is, for the semaphore signals, actually abrupt movement between, let's say, stop and proceed. Furthermore, as you see, they kind of have a little more interesting mix of how they show things. So where the others, I would say, is more orderly, here it seems more like the limitation of the technology at the time, how many signaling aspects was integrated into the signals. However, none of them are actually produced by Märklin anymore, but especially for vintage collectors, they are still available out there. Whew, that's a lot of signals. So as you can see, Märklin actually provide a wide range of signals, and although it might look overwhelming, a lot of people will still say that's not enough. For example, if you really want to be prototypical, these signals are actually German signals. What if I'm from Belgium, France, US, or so on, right? They have signals that look completely different. Some of them even behave and work differently, right? But of course I cannot cover it all. So what I'm going to do in this series of signals videos is focus on the latest edition of the semaphore signals and the light signals, and talk about how to install them and how to use them. And at the end we'll also talk a little about how do we place them on the layout, or more exactly, where do we place them on the layout. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit like, and please do subscribe to the channel. Enjoy!